This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Welman.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, episode 20. It's the biggest test of the year, I think. The last chance for the All Blacks to, break the losing streak. Last chance for the Springboks to stamp their dominance. And as usual, Harry's here to talk to us. How's it, Harry?
How's it, MV? We're getting some people interested in our pod, and I'm feeling a bit nervous, like I have to up my game and not be so controversial.
And I think the controversy is what attracts them. I was a bit nervous there because suddenly all these, important people are talking to us or listening to us for that matter. So lots of pressure all of a sudden. I wanted to just say before we started, you will be doing a special recording after the game. We will post it Saturday night still after the game as well. Your thoughts, your impressions, your immediate after-match ideas and what you learned from the game and the likes. Hopefully it's not going to be a sad one. But just make sure we'll post that on Saturday night. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I'll be breathless, mindless, ill-considered takes. There'll be no contemplative perspectives. It's not going to be even-minded. I'll be one-eyed, one-legged, and emote. It's either going to be the champagne or I'll be crying. I'll be crying my soup.
In your brandy. Brandy and Coca-Cola. Now, I tell you what, hopefully somebody's not trying to take your pants down again like they did Alice Park. Woman was tackling you there.
The captain, yeah, the ship captain. She was on a cruise of some kind.
Not in the same planet as you were. Yeah. All right, listen, we're all excited about this. We were all waiting. Rassie postponed the team announcement from Tuesday, which he's been doing for a bit now, and then suddenly it's going to be moved to Thursday, 12 o'clock, and everybody plans accordingly, and the whole world is caught unawares, and we have to come up with all kinds of things to talk about, like people have said quite correctly. The All Blacks announce the team, and Rassie goes and announces his team straight afterwards. And our heading is Rassie the king of mind games? Let's start with that. Is Rassie the king of mind games, yes or no? Is this a mind game, or is it just another one of those, oh, shucks, I didn't know kind of things?
Yeah, there's a really good actress named Jennifer Connelly. She's in a movie called The House of Sand and Fog, and she has this great line that stuck with me forever. She said, it's a chaotic movie, everything's out of control, and she says, I'm not complicated, I just complicate things. And I go, oh, yeah, I know people like that. We all know someone like that, I think Rassie is not always plotting something for 3 years, because that you could look at this and say, oh, you set that up. You set that up for this match. There was one moment in the World Cup where he announced late was on time. So, just the long setup, the long con. But I don't think sometimes he's acting that way. Sometimes I think he's literally getting out of the bed and saying, how about this week we do something different, because he's bored. I just think sometimes it's not that surprising, right? None of these people are surprises. There's very little that the Razor can really do. Put Beauden Barrett on the bench. Okay, I think the Boks are used to Beauden Barrett from the bench. Andre Pollard starting. Okay, that's pretty much what's been true since 2015. So I do sometimes think that we get too caught up in the mind games. However, I do like it if it looks like a mind game, because if something seems like a mind game, it kind of becomes a mind game. If I do like it that Razor seems to have been reactive this week in some of the choices he made. And it reminds me of there's a Mad magazine had that Spy versus Spy, where there was a guy all dressed in white and a guy dressed all in black, and the one guy would have a listening device. They would keep trying to outfox each other. And in the end, it was kind of like, it always comes down to one kick in rugby, right? It's going to be a hell of a match. And whatever plans that the coaches think they have, in the end, it'll probably come down to someone we haven't even talked about yet. Wallace Satiti, or it's going to be, Jaden Hendrickson, or something that we haven't even discussed.
I wanted to ask you this question. You just mentioned that if it looks like a con. So if it walks like a duck, that looks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it probably is a duck. I was wondering now if Rassie was waiting for the All Black team and say, oh, they're choosing this one, I'm going to go for this option. They had all set out before. Sort of to put Razor maybe on the back foot, or am I, giving him too much credit, like you just said? Maybe it's just all innocent and not like that at all. But he said now at the press conference, the team was announced internally Monday night at 8 o'clock already. So why wait till Thursday morning directly after the All Blacks? There must be something to it.
A current Bok, who's in the starting 15, told me the same story. Like he knew exactly who was starting, including the 9-10. So I think he's telling the truth. I think what the overall story is that Rassie wanted to become a more unpredictable team. If there was one knock on the Springbok teams of old that were pretty good, like Heineken Myers, they were so predictable. Like you, not only did you know who was playing, you actually knew what they were going to do for the first 7 defensive sets and the 7 most, first attacking. I think Rassie was frustrated with that from Cheetah's days, from old days. He liked to do things different. So if you think about it, if the whole thing has been bomb squad, we got beaten by the bomb squad. We won for 62 minutes. We were ahead until 11 minutes to go. We were almost there. All Blacks are not finished. We just lost the final 10. If you keep saying that, and then Rassie comes and says, okay, well, we're going to start with our, knockout winning team, LaRue and Pollard, and then a very familiar backline and one injury-induced change. And a pack that looks like a World Cup pack, except for Nortje at 5, but that's also by, out of his hands. It does look a bit like a bait and switch, sure. But I don't think it's a bait and switch at the final minute. I don't think he was doing that to his players. The players say that Rassie always sits down with them and tells them exactly what's going to happen. Each player knows. He believes very much in the element of non-surprise for his players and the element of surprise for his adversary.
When we started talking about this episode, one of your voice notes, you said to me, listen, France got a hiding in the First World War, and I love the fact that we bring history into a rugby pod. I mean, that's just awesome. So they got a hiding in the First World War, even though they won it eventually, and they decided to build the Maginot Line. That will now keep out all the enemies and the likes. And then the enemy changed up its strategy completely, and then they were caught short. You just mentioned there that the All Blacks know that they could have won this game on Saturday, and we know we could have lost. The Springboks could have lost quite easily. But that last 10 minutes, the bench specifically fell short. They couldn't defend that lead, if that's the right way to approach it. And this team pretty much is their Maginot Line, like you mentioned. They decided that Springboks are going to be doing this, so we have to do this to be able to counter. You mentioned that Razor's being reactive. But now suddenly Rassie's going to not go for the blitzkrieg. He's going to go for the heavy artillery kind of a thing. So will this Maginot Line team work? Is it going to address the issues that the All Blacks identified last week that were the shortcomings for not being able to win that game? Or has Rassie caught them out?
Yeah, so history is replete with examples of people fighting the preceding war instead of the war that's about to come. Technology never rests, and in life and death and war, you're at your most inventive. You will invent the most things. You will think of a tank that you never thought of before, because it suddenly becomes very important to both project force and protect your own force. Rugby is no different. It's a highly militaristic game. Come up on the fields of Eton and Rugby in Britain when they were trying to colonialize the world. So the whole thing smacks of what did you do last time? What have you done the last 3 times? What have you done 5 times out of the last 7? And so it makes sense that you would try to build the version of a Maginot Line. The Maginot Line was a series of battlements throughout northern France, through Lille and into the Belgian flatlands, the lowlands. And it was supposed to promote, almost like a moat would around a castle, a series of impediments so that the invading force from Germany could not sweep through on motorcycle, horse, carriage, wagon, and get from Baden-Baden and Heidelberg and Hamburg in 1 day or 2 days all the way to the French hinterlands. It failed miserably because of projectile. It failed miserably because of aircraft, because you could, the rudimentary dropping of a bomb behind enemy lines. And then the mechanics of the Mercedes-Benz, vehicles that could just buzz through. And so the whole thing was a beautiful monument to thinking in reverse.
Obsolescence.
That defense would help you. Happened as the Russians against the Japanese in 1905. It happens a lot. And so you look at it now, and it's almost asymmetrical, right? Rassie has said, okay, you are you're set up to defend an exact thing, and I'm going to give you the exact opposite thing. And in this telling of the story, what the Boks do now is build a slow poison, rely on set piece, kick the ball out, organize the back line, hard running smash ball by Damian Delende. But because they just saw Tony Ball, the All Blacks cannot completely rely on that, because at any point in time, Damian can become, more of the igniter. And you always have LaRue lurking around doing LaRue things. So I do think there's enough guesswork here where the All Blacks have to play it honest for 50, 60 minutes. The other thing is maybe Rassie wants to see what Sasha can do when he's coming from the bench, like a microwave, So what can you do now? Lucanio on, Jaden Hendrickson, there's enough inventiveness there, depending on who you leave with them, that it could be interesting. It also might come down to the fact that the All Blacks don't have as many options to change. You have 1,100 caps now on the Springboks, the 23. And so with New Zealand, if you say, I have to have a better bench, I'm taking TJ Perenara and Beauden Barrett off. What if Carlos Ratima has a really bad day? Like, what happens then? It's not like Ratima is someone who has a lot of experience behind a pack. What if the pack is getting beaten? What does that look like? McKenzie has never looked good behind a beaten pack. What if you have Carlos Ratima and David McKenzie? So there's a possibility this thing gets out of hand for the All Blacks. But I see why Razor did it. I see why he put his boy Will Jordan at the back at fullback. Will Jordan's been saying for ages, I'm a fullback. So you could see that, Razor did what he thought he could do. I just think this one shapes up like a game where the Springboks could finish them off in the first half and then finish them again in the second. It might be a double finish. And this is why I'm feeling particularly good. I hate saying that because I know we're underdogs, always underdogs. But this is one where I like the idea of almost that Twickenham result before the World Cup, where we go out early, we go out strong, we play proper rugby, and then we finish up with the dressing at the end.
So to put things into context a little bit, what's at stake here? I mentioned earlier in the beginning is the fact that the All Blacks cannot really afford to lose this game, because that'll make it 4 in a row on the back foot going into next year, having lost 4 in a row. And for the Springboks, it's just, okay, if we lose, it's okay, but we experimented everything else. Scott Robertson is still proving himself. He must be under a lot of pressure from the New Zealand supporters and the media and everybody else. He cannot afford to lose this game. And that's probably why he was being this almost, I don't want to say predictable, but I'm going to say it's predictable. In that sense, do you think that's what he was going for? Maybe, is it that important for him to win this game, or do you think he might live to see another day? If he loses, what's going to happen?
He will survive a loss, Robertson, but he's already in all sorts of pressure. And the knock on him is that there's no innovation going on within Camp All Black right now. But the only innovation within the All Blacks in the last 5 years has been about mole defense. It's not been in the world of attack. The other knock is that he's not picking smart players. Right or wrong, inside New Zealand, the thought is that Scott Barrett's not a particularly smart captain. He's not in the Kieran Reid, Richie McCaw kind of stratosphere. That's something that an All Black hooker, retired hooker, like echoed to me as I was flying in. I talked to him. There's another line of thought is that Razor Robertson is being not brave enough, that he's not cutting the cord on some of these guys, and that we're doing the same old. So that's interesting that Wallace Satiti comes in on the side of the scrum. Ethan Blackadder was ineffective in my opinion. He got pushed back, he got tackled back, and he wasn't much of a stopper. But he was injured, so we don't really know much about Razor Robertson's opinion, although he did pick Satiti, number 8, over Hoskins Satutu. So there is a thought that he's really putting a lot on Wallace Satiti. So that's a player we're all going to watch. Number 6 for the All Blacks. We want to see what that does next to Tupou Vaa'i. That would be more physicality, and you're thinking that he wants a harder runner. He's still stuck with Sam Cane, though, on the side of the scrum as well. And I don't think Sam Cane is as quick as he ever was, and he was never that quick to begin with. And I think he's a card liability. Very lucky boy to be playing this week. So I think there's a couple of issues there where Razor's under pressure. Let's project forward and say that the Springboks do win, as I'm saying they would and should. If they do win, and it's sort of let's say it's easy. Let's say it's by 7 to 10 points. Not only do the Springboks probably win the whole rugby championship in round 4 with 2 rounds to go, and then they're able to really experiment against the Pumas. They get the Freedom Cup back, and this inflection point that we talked about before starts to become more apparent, because now you look at what's the lost 10 games, lost 8 games. It looks very much like there's a changing of the guard, which All Blacks had never conceded. Yes, you won the World Cup. Yes, you won the World Cup a couple of times, but you're not really better than us, because look at our head-to-head. When that head-to-head starts to become wrong for them, it's like I've always said, if you consistently beat the All Blacks, you'll be the #1 team in the world. It doesn't matter who's up or down. That's going to be your best marker, because that probably means you're winning World Cups as well. And so that's what I think faces Razor Robertson is, am I presiding over the decline? Is it a slow decline, like, the British Empire, or is it a quick decline, like the French and Indochina? We're going full history now. Like, am I collapsing, or like everyone's overrunning my stuff, or do I continue to keep relevant? Razor has to think about that. It also might mean that if he loses, he might go to his bosses and say, guys, I need overseas players. Yeah. I know we think we can win without Richie Mwanga, but we cannot. I need him. I need Brody Retallick. I've got to have some beef, and that's another excuse pattern that probably keeps Razor Robertson alive, because he can always say that, look, guys, I'm fighting the Boks who can bring their best, and I'm not allowed to. And so that gives him another leg to stand on. He dearly wants to be the coach when the All Blacks do their 8-game tour in 2026 of South Africa. You could that's nirvana for All Blacks to go back to those old days. I think he survives no matter what, but certainly a blowtorch of pressure is applied to the breakdance king if he cannot make this at least close.
Certain Cars has a wide selection of vehicles available at certaincars.co.za and at our branches at Casino and Menlyn. With over 30 years of trust and excellence, Certain Cars is your #1 nationwide dealership. With over 95% customer satisfaction, our hand-picked cars will ensure that you find your dream car from one of the top brands available at Certain Cars. Certain Cars, the better way to buy and sell cars.
Interesting thing, I don't know how you managed it, but you hung around to the All Blacks yesterday. Don't know if you went in undercover or something, if it was a black cap or they thought you were an honorary Kiwi or something. But you mentioned to me that the All Blacks were thinking that they could dominate the set pieces. They can beat us at the scrums. And you just said our team is much more of that hammer rather than the, what's the other word, the opposite of hammer team. The scrum's going to be important, set piece is going to be important. Not going to be Tony ball that much. It's going to be all the pressure. And now the All Blacks think they can take us on at scrum time. Is that a realistic expectation?
The most fascinating subtopic of this game is what you've just said. I did run into about 8 or 9 All Blacks. So it wasn't the top line, although Caleb Clark was one of them. Tamaiti Williams was a guy that I talked to. Oof. In terms of just being big around and a good 6'6", maybe 6'5" listed, but I think a good 6'6".
Yeah.
But also just like hell to get your arm around. I'm doing a selfie with him. I'm trying to get my arm all the way around his shoulders. I'm not a small guy, as you know, you've met me. And this guy, it makes me feel like a kid. This guy was huge. And TJ Paranai was the most talkative guy on the field a week ago. He's also the most talkative guy on top of Table Mountain. That's where we were, by the way. And so I'm talking to TJ, and he said something which literally struck a chord, which is they believe they could have the upper hand in scrums. They are not convinced that the scrum superiority has been settled. That's super interesting. Tamaiti Williams is a young prop too. He hasn't necessarily come up with that kind of aura of the Springbok scrum. So Tamaiti versus Frans Malherbe, Tyrrell Lomax versus Oxencha, worth the price of admission. right there. That one thing. Jason Ryan, the coach, Jason Ryan was also up the top there, and he was wanting the players not to be talking that much to the locals. So that was interesting too. He was very good at whisking TJ away.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Stop it. But I don't know if there's much to be. I mean, I think that's almost obvious. I think that Don Human would actually know that and respect very much the All Black scrum, and know that has not been settled. I don't think that's been settled. I don't think from the World Cup final or from the one at Ellis Park that you can say the Springbok scrum was better. We cannot say that. Do you blame that on the fact that we don't have a proper power lock combination right now? I don't know. You know, Norte looks a little bit thin, a little bit skinny in the legs. But I just think that they're a proper scrum. And listen, I've just the idea, having literally scrummed against Ox and then stood next to Tom IT and hugged the man, there is a significant size edge in the All Black scrum.
You mentioned that World Cup final. I mean, that was one thing that stood out, is the fact that we never dominated the scrums. Remember that very, very last scrum where Jasper Wiese had to pick up the ball and hang on to it for dear life to get to the final whistle. I think this is exactly what you're saying. This is going to be the crux of it, where it's going to be made or broken. And I wanted to ask you this. In the last two games, against both Australia, where there were uncontested scrums in the second half, big thing about that at the moment, and then at Ellis Park, where the ref was sort of absent, people joking, the TMO was a smoke break and the ref was watching his phone or something, the scrums were also not given their proper due. You know, never really, we could never really stamp our authority. What do you think, from a Springbok point of view, how strong are we really? Is it really still a thing? I mean, we haven't settled the debate, you said, but you talked about how big Marty Williams is now, but how good are our guys really in terms of the scrumming?
I think against all other teams, the Springboks have a scrum edge, not just on whatever first front row they want to pick, but the second front row. I mean, it doesn't even matter. Like, if you put Marks in there with France and they had Kitsoff, that would be, a hell of a scrumming front row as well. So I think you can have two, possibly three, that match up well against everyone else. I just don't think the All Blacks are a bad scrumming team anymore. I think their starting front row is a very difficult front row to beat. That being said, the ref a week ago, and I never talk about the refs' names. I don't want to get them too famous and be part of the whole discussion so much. But what he did was he got in the place where they were doing the hits back in scrums. The hit used to be ferocious, Castro via Giovanni kind of hits where you like literally rock someone. They took that away because of neck injuries, and they try to do the place and the bind, and the set and the crouch and all this. But now it's back, because once you do bind and post the crouch and the bind, there is still a mini hit, and that hit's become a little bit more ferocious. And that's where the Human coached scrum really thrives. Ox soaks up the hit, doesn't do the hit, literally wants his big, Tyrrell Lomax, also a tall guy. He wants him to be overextended, and then he can survive it, and then he does his thing. He gets them in an awkward place, especially with his feet. France is a big hit guy. He actually wants to make you wear him, like, wear Malherbe like a cloak, and then kind of soak on you. And what he wants to do is grab you by the armpit hair, preferably, and then, squeeze that thing. He wants to give you a little swivel. And that hit was taken away by the referee, who stood in the mouth of the scrum in front of Kubus. And so there were two scrums where I saw the hit would have gone our way, and it wasn't able to happen. And then the third time where he just prevented it by like standing in between the props. So you would think this would be a proper scrum without going into the name of the referee. I think we're going to have a scrum dominant settling conversation at the end of this.
I wanted to ask you, one of the things that stood out, and where you and I just agreed, and several people agreed with me, is the fact that the difference between the two teams lay in the bench. So when the Springbok bench came on, they geared up, they went up another gear, and the All Blacks slowed down. And that was a big difference. Do you think this bench is now up to the standard of a bomb squad, if I can call it that? I don't know what you call a New Zealand bomb squad, a Kiwi squad or something, but is it up to the standard what the Bok bomb squad is bringing?
Well, Kwaka can be a one-man bomb squad sometimes, can't he? Like he literally just seems like he is the
True.
bomb squad sometimes. Elric Lowe has been one of the best performing, consistent forwards in this rugby championship. So if you take those two guys alone, even though no one's a designated lock, that's interesting. Malcolm Marx is still an unbelievable bench player. Like he's in most teams, including he would start in the All Blacks. So it would be Tamati Williams, Malcolm Marx, and Cyril Lomax. Koch is one of those unpraised guys, just kind of rolls along. Skinnerkamp is turning into something. So I think what your question is really entailing is not those guys. It's about the idea of Jaden, Sasha, and Lucanio. And so that's very interesting because the bomb squad sifted around now. Instead of a forward orientated bomb squad, it's a backline bomb squad. So we could be talking about on Saturday night, wow, look at what that looked like, you know? Lucky Arm coming in, igniting along with whoever stays on, Billy and Jesse and Jaden. It could be another thing. I think more interestingly, it's the idea that the All Blacks, in my mind, didn't really fix their problem. Yes, they switched TJ Perenara to the bench, but in so doing, they expose themselves to be even further behind when he comes on. So he has more to do. And TJ at this point in time is not a sniping scrum off. He's not going to run away from Grant Williams or Jaden. Bowden Barrett, that's a good change. But Anton Leonard-Brown was one of the least performing, least impactful players that I saw. I mean, he just looked noticeably slower than everyone else. So to me, they could have done with a different looking bomb squad. Maybe it was time for the All Blacks to go 7-1. Maybe it was time for them to go 6-2 and have, some real firepower coming from the back, but then have a proper, advantage at line out and ruck. I don't know, but it seems to me there's a lost opportunity here for the All Blacks. I think Rassie's probably grinning right now and saying, this is exactly what I wanted to see. I want to see Sasha close out a match. And I want to see my boy Andre Pollard, who I've been a little bit rough on, let's be honest. I want to see him stand up and maybe have his day in the sun. I remember that when there's a closeout match with Wales, and it was in Cape Town, and Pollard was magnificent that day. And I remember like when he airlifted him into the World Cup squad and sort of made him pay his dues, your 34A, player 34A, and now we'll have a little bit of time and then maybe a little more time. And then when it really counted, when everything was on the line, the boy wouldn't miss. And not only that, he had some incredible, skip passes. I mean, he tackled, he made breaks. Andre Pollard, when I looked at his stats over all of his knockout matches, just knockout matches in the World Cup, compares with any number 10 in the world ever. And not so much from the kicking the goals, which we'll go to, and that's phenomenal, but it's his running game. He makes players miss. He allows the rest of his backline freedom, and he is a threat at 10 running you over. So I look at Andre Pollard as lining up Damian McKenzie and saying, I'm going to take that smile off your face, boy. And that's going to be interesting to watch.
It gives me a good warm feeling. I'd love to wipe that smile off his face. Anyway, I wanted to ask you one more thing about the All Blacks before we go into the Springboks. Last week, they conceded 14 penalties, the All Blacks. I mean, and they were lucky not to get more yellow cards, if you ask me. The Boks only conceded, I think, 5. Do you think this team might be more disciplined, or do you think discipline is a problem in general with the All Blacks lately?
The hard thing when you're trying to coach discipline, the word discipline itself makes you play less hard. It's a prefect word. It's a head boy word. And you don't want that. You want fire-breathing, blood-curdling guys who are just knocking snot. And we just want it to be accurate. I would never coach a team and talk to them about be disciplined because then it makes them too meek, like little lambs. I want you to kill them, but in a proper way. Hit the fuck out of them in a controlled manner.
Don't get caught.
Yeah. But I don't know if you saw the stat. Everyone should look it up by Opta Johnny. And it actually said it took apart the height at which each team or the 4 teams in the rugby championship tackled. And it was demonstrable that the Boks were tackling lower than everyone else. I love that they actually used Frans Malherbe as their backup picture of it. But it was in statistical terms, it was extremely meaningful. Even if it looks like it's only 35% versus 28%, but that's a lot of difference when you look at tackle heights. And there were just very few high tackles made by the Boks. So I do think for New Zealand All Blacks, they just have to grapple with this idea that they are tackling higher than the Boks are, and that when you're in a match where a referee is looking at two teams, it's not that you are so high. If you are higher than the other team you're playing, it's noticeable to the referee. If that makes sense, it's basically the contrast. Like
the pictures
that's how
are
we
showing.
see things. Yeah. So if they were playing some other team, it wouldn't look so glaring. But it does look very glaring when you play these two teams. The other thing is, I looked at an interesting stat about the Wallabies, and the Wallabies are trying to have quick rucks under Joe Schmidt, and they had a quicker ruck before. It was 2.7 average, and now it's 3.1. So bad news. No. It turns out that they're keeping 97% of their rucks compared to 93, which is also a massive difference. I always tell teams, don't look at 94%, 97%, to give it as a rating of 7 and 4. So if you're every number above 90% at a ruck retention, you're at 0, you're at 1, you're at 2, you're at 3. You could only hope for a 98%, 99, but you get a 9 or an 8. So the lesson is the Wallabies are protecting their ruck better by having a little bit slower ball, because maybe 2.7 was too quick. If you're trying to always do that, your scrum off is always getting snagged and snaffled. You saw Kobus getting just ragged on for 60 minutes. It's something about making sure you've got the clean. Like, let's get the clean and then the double clean. Okay, did that add on a second? Yeah, I probably did. But I prefer to have good, clean exit ball, because I don't want to have people scragging my 9. So I do think there's things around accuracy that the All Blacks can work on. And so maybe they're going to be even more ferocious in the clean, and maybe they'll be more deliberate. But I would expect them not to be penalized 14 times. Mm-hmm. What I think, if I was an All Black fan, I'd be worried about is, I don't know how you correct high tackles, because that's just instinct. If you're tackling high, you keep tackling high. It's just hard to change that. It takes you about 6 months before you can really work on a better tackle system. And that's where I think the Springboks have a big edge. They're less cardable than the All Blacks now.
Well, Rassie said it very clearly. Tackling can be coached. And you can clearly see from the stats that you referred to, it's good coaching. So, okay, yeah, Scott Robbins is a new coach. It might take time to get him to tackle lower, but it can be worked on. And mentioning tackles and high tackles, I see Sam Cane, the Springboks decided not to cite him because he personally apologized to Sia after the game.
I like that kind of stuff, by the way. I don't like teams having bad blood.
I agree.
I would just say this. Clearly, Sam Cane was lucky. If you want to get deep into the Rassie mindset, we might say, what if Rassie wants Sam Cane on? He doesn't want to be
the same
removed.
Thing. How many times did you hear Sam Cane's name last week, except for the high tackle? He was anonymous. He wasn't there.
He's not a carrier. He's just a tackler. So it puts an amazing amount of pressure on guys like Ardi Savea, who can handle the pressure, of course. But Wallace Satitu, who we don't know can handle the pressure. What if Wallace Satiti's first carry across the gain line, he's met by Sia and Peter Steff in a bad mood? I mean, he's never played that in Super Rugby. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people think they're good until they get punched in the face. So we'll see what he can do. Not the face guys, the midriff. But, I do think there's an element here of surprise for Wallace Satiti. I don't think Cape Town is the fortress, like I've said, the grim abattoir that Loftus is.
I took exception
it's
to
more
that.
It's more of a gluten-free vibe, red, vegetarian kind of fortress. But it's going to be plenty loud, and Cape Town fans know how to be loud. And so, yeah, it's going to be a vibe. I do think it's going to be interesting in the crowd, though, to see some of the locals who support the All Blacks. And I think there's so much spice around this rivalry that it's one of the true wonderful contests in sport, and there's no hype needed. You just roll it out there and everything is present.
Yeah, well, if Alice Parker's any indication of what we can expect this week, I think, you're in for a treat. I wish I was there with you. Would have loved to be there. Hey, one more question before I go into the Springbok side. Do you think, having now seen the Springbok side, Razor would have changed anything? Or do you think he still might be thinking he picked the right team?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I would, if I were Razor, I would have picked a different team. But Razor started to make me think that he's not as elastic, not as agile in his thought patterns as maybe as Rassie is for sure, but also maybe as we thought Razor was. Maybe the breakdancing isn't so much a sign of agility as it is a ritual, because he did the same one. It wasn't a very good one either. So maybe it was more of a rote pattern that he developed at the Crusaders. He does look like he is adverse to wholesale changes. And in a way, it's almost regressive or reactionary for him to move his two best playmakers to the bench. And now he's put all the pressure on Carlos, Damian, and Will.
Carlos or Cortez?
Which could be, I mean, Cortez. That could be a master stroke, or it could be the undoing. If the thing about Test rugby is, we've seen a lot in this year where the team that starts quick, look at the Irish series, can really just go to the house, because in the end, it's so much effort to catch up. And so what if it is one of those dominant forward performances by the Boks for 40 minutes, 55 minutes, and accumulates points, and you have Cortez and Damian trying too hard. Then you have TJ Perenara and Bowden Barrett coming on, where it's almost too much to play for. And then we have the intercept try instead of the other way around. Then they're pushing, and someone like Lucanio Arm reads that perfectly, or Jesse Creel, and takes it the other way around. So, I don't know. But I hesitate to punish Razor too much, because I don't think he has the cattle at this point to do too much tweaking. But I would probably have gone 6-2. I would have called the Boks bluff and said, "Now we're going to have the bomb squad."
Certain Cars has a wide selection of vehicles available at certaincars.co.za and at our branches at Casino and Menlyn. With over 30 years of trust and excellence, Certain Cars is your #1 nationwide dealership. With over 95% customer satisfaction, our hand-picked cars will ensure that you find your dream car from one of the top brands available at Certain Cars. Certain Cars, the better way to buy and sell cars.
All right. Something else I wanted to ask you in terms of the approach to this game. We saw what Ireland did in the second test. You remember you still told me, and we agreed on it. It's probably the bloodiest start to a test match that I can remember. One of the most physically intense. They basically played the Boks off the field. Franco Master played with a broken leg for 2 minutes. Lots of things like that. Do you think the All Blacks might want to, copy that, sort of stamp their dominance in terms of physicality? Because you just mentioned how big they are. And we pride ourselves on our physicality, but we're not that big anymore. We're not the biggest rugby players in the world. It's sort of an acne thing that, the big Springboks. The Springboks are not the biggest players anymore. Do you think the All Blacks might try that kind of approach?
Yeah, looking at the starting packs, they're heavier. I'm not sure who's taller. Probably they're a bit taller as well, because of Tamati Williams being basically 8 inches taller than Ox. Jasper is about the same height as Artie. Maybe Sam Kane's a bit short, but I think bigger, taller, stronger. Sure, All Blacks probably have that. It's the force, it's the power, it's the ability to accelerate into contact. It's some people can watch a punch being thrown at them and keep their eyes open. Others don't. They turn away. So the Springboks are comfortable with contact. That's for sure. Sio Kolisi is really good in contact. Same thing with Bongi. Bongi seems to have no fear. So there's guys in there that would just run through a wall. Jasper Visa being chief among them. So if it does turn out to be that way, I think it could shape up like the Irish test in Durban. I'm not sure that's so much about Ireland as just the nature of the beast. When you lose in test rugby, and then you face being swept, you're far from home, everything you read and see looks like it's against you. You feel like the ref did you wrong. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter, guys. You just feel it. Yeah, I was robbed. you can come out with a bit of grievance, and that could be good for the All Blacks. I found that matters in All Black Springboks teams matches a lot in the first 20. So if you want to have a read on the match, just first 20, lock and loaded, pick out your Peter Steph Toy and your Wallace Satiti. Take a look at Scott Barrett and Eben Etzebeth, what's happening there. It usually tells a pretty big story. Like, you can almost tell, as a veteran Bok watcher, you can almost tell if that first 20 looks ferocious and proper Easter, it's going to be a good day. And then when there's parity, or like the Irish test where you go, ooh, wow, they broke 3 of our legs today, it could go bad.
The respect. Okay, you mentioned the name Siya Kolisi, and this is an important thing. I never expected him to play. Rassie says it was a nose thing, not a cheekbone. And the doctor told him, you can either have reset now and be out for 3 weeks, or you can have reset in 2 weeks' time and then be out for 3 weeks. There's no need to do it right now. So that's what he said at the press conference. And it reminds me of Antoine Dupont. So we have the guy in the game. We saw how important he is to South Africa in terms of his leadership, not necessarily always in terms of his game. He's not always the best flanker, but he's the best captain. We need him. We saw a bit of difference he makes. I think we're gambling there. Do you think that's a bit of a long shot, trying to get him in there? Maybe give him a bit of a rest, bring Marco or somebody else in?
He does have a premium, that transcends his actual playing stats on the field. It's just an ability to help people rise. We've talked a little bit maybe on air, but also maybe off air, about this plus minus stat that NBA uses, where it's not so much about what your stats are in the basketball match, how many buckets you make, how many rebounds you take, and how many assists you make. It's also when you were on the floor against this particular set of players, were you part of a plus minus edge? Siya Kolisi just helps everyone go up about 5%. They trust him. They rely on him to sing, to move, to charge, to sprint out, to set the vibe. And I think that's hard to calculate. Probably not incalculable, but it's close to being incalculable. Also on a nose, I mean, let's be honest, he's been hanging out with Dricus du Plessis. So probably he's just got, some tips on what you do when your nose is stuffed. I've broken my nose 3 times, once in rugby and twice otherwise. It came back to the right shape. So once upon a time it was crooked, now it's straight. It's just hard to breathe sometimes. So I do think that Siya is similar in that he's a warrior. I don't think it'll play into anything at all. I think he'll run into knees and hips and ribs the same way he did before. That's how I see him. Maybe I'm wrong. From high school on, from Gray PE high school on, I think he's a guy who loved contact and ran through it. I would just say this. It seems to me this match sets up like a war, like an old school, how much heart do you have? How much pain are you willing to take? And if that's the case, I want my actual captain there.
Yeah.
Peter Steph would have done a great job. Eben could do the same thing. Look, it's a team full of captains. Bongi, like you just go down the list and you can see captains everywhere. But it's pretty cool to have a guy who has an extra dimension, who has the ability to rally a nation, and someone I think whose word matters. And let's say you're in a tough trench, Maginot Line. Let's go back to World War I. What if you're in, the poison gas trench and nothing is going right? You look at your Captain Kolisi, and he's probably going to tell you something you need to hear. I think that's what the All Blacks are missing, by the way. There's a lot of stories about how the All Blacks would win matches close because Richie would gather everyone around him and say, forget what the coaches told us. We're not putting a jumper in the air. We're going to hit that jumper when he comes down, and we're going to sack him. And they did it, and they won. So I don't know what tactical agility Siya has, but he seems to be able to command the respect. And so maybe it's a whisper in the ear from another guy. What if Eben Etzebeth, who's quite a tactician nowadays, can say to him, hey, best friend, Siya, that's you and I talk to the boys right now. I think there's something about that. And I think it's in stark contrast to Scott Barrett, who doesn't always seem like the sharpest tool in the shed to me, and Artie Savea, who also can sometimes lose the plot.
Sorry, when you talked about the gas lines in the First World War, inevitably that final episode of Blackadder came to mind, where they stormed into obvious death. And I think that's to a degree what the All Blacks are trying to do. They're just going to storm us and try and run over us, knowing that they're probably going to be losing it. I want to just ask you one more question about Sia. When you go into any sort of a competition, you identify your opposition's weak spots. And don't you think it's inevitable that he might be a little bit, you said he will run through a wall, but I mean, it's not that easy to just not flinch, for example, or if they deliberately target him, and I don't mean in a bad way, but they know that he's injured, so you're going to, go for the weak spot. Don't you think that's a bit of a liability, apart from everything else?
I don't think so. I watched him post-match when it probably was, when the adrenaline had already shed and he was probably the most tender, just speaking as a guy who's actually broken his nose 3 times. And he went in for full hugs of the All Blacks. He did like monster hugs with France. He was right there, face to face, cheek to cheek. I'm just going to say that I feel like if you were picking someone who might be a good boxer, I think Sia probably is a pretty good boxer. I could just see him keeping his eyes open and counter punching, which, depends on your ability to watch a punch instead of flinching. I've never seen him flinch before. He seems to always be one of those guys who can run really nicely into contact. We'll see. Let's just say this. This is the kind of thing legends are born of. This match is the kind of things legends are born of. If Sia runs in with his broken face, broken nose, whatever he's broken, and and he's first up and he's got Tupou Vaa'i or Sam Cane, captain versus captain, that'd be cool. Just a proper smash up in minute 5. Somebody going to get carded. Yeah, I'm there for that.
All right. Let's talk about the players, the standout players that have been selected. The first one is Kane Moody's back. And I mean, it's a big jump from playing fullback at midstream college last Friday against the Lions to now playing against the All Blacks in Cape Town Stadium at wing. I know, and I watched him in the press conference. He seems extremely nervous. He's really, you can see he's biting his nails there. What do you think about that choice?
It's interesting. So now there's a switch up. Like Cheslin goes to left wing, Kanan's on the right wing. Cheslin was the right wing a week ago. Curtly, Arendse, the butcher, looked a little bit small compared to the All Black wings. So maybe you're adding the size of Moody, who's a good 6'3" guy, over 100 kgs. So now Moody is tackling or marking Mark Talea, and Cheslin Colby's up against Sever Reese, a live wire. So you have 2 live wires against each other, and then you have a slippery guy against a pretty good man marker. Kane Moody hasn't been an impressive 13, but the fact that he could play 13 at all means he's not the same old wing. He's not just, a dumb wing that finishes. He's a guy who knows schematics. So if you're looking for a matchup in the back line, if you're into backline players, I would think Moody versus Mark Talea is going to be interesting. So how do you force that? Because it's not so easy to get a one-on-one with Kane and Moody if you're the All Blacks. It's not like you can just always run Mark Talea in his spot, perfect channel, and find Kane and Moody. First of all, Jesse Creel's coming out of like a bolt from nowhere. Jesse Creel made one of the biggest mistakes a week ago, so he's going to be like, Jesse Creel. I mean, he hasn't even unclenched his jaw since that time. He's been doing like jaw muscles.
1,000 push-ups a day.
With one-handed push-ups.
He pushed the earth away.
He wants to nail Mark Talea on a cutback. Mark Talea's got that kind of hitch. So, number 13's best dream is you catch him on that zigzag and then I zag when he zagged and smash him. It's not so easy to find him. So I think that's one thing. The way the box cut in on 13 prevents you from having a whole lot of 1-1s on the carry. Where you find 1-on-1s is often in the air. And so now where's Kane Moody's superpower? I think it's in the air. So that tells me that Andre Pollard's going to be looking for Kane Moody on the chase, on the kick, on the diagonal. Echoes, Jaden Hendricks coming off the bench, echoes of Sydney about 2 years ago where there was that perfect lofted kick. And there's nothing that can make Mark Talea taller than he is right now. He's going to be the height he is. And so if he jumps 30 inches in the air and Kane Moody just jumps 30 inches in the air, there's a nice advantage there for Kane Moody.
I think Corbett is still dreaming about that day. Where's the ball? Oh, it's going towards the try line at a rapid rate of knots. All right, and then in terms of Pollard and Willie, that got age old, I'm not call it age old, but that particular combination says a lot. The fact that they're interchangeable, Willie's vision, Andre, you mentioned all that Andre could do earlier on, but the fact that they're combining those two, I thought at one stage maybe they're going to put Sasha on at 15 and try and test that combination, but they're going for the old tried and tested.
Nah, I like it. I like it like one of those old gunslinger movies, the old cowboy. You know, I'm done killing men. I'm just a potato farmer. And you pull them out and go, yeah, I can still shoot. So I like really coming off there and saying, I was there in the rain in Twickenham in 2015 when you smashed my dream. And look at me, 9 years later. Now I'm going to take you out, you know? Pollard was there. There's actually a lot of players. Pollard, Creel, Dialende, Willie LaRue were all there on the field having a weep while Sonny Bill Williams consoled them. What a cool game. What a cool rivalry it is that you have that many players. How many players were there in Albany? 57-0. A lot. And so I like the idea of Rassie going back to the well and saying, you know what? I'm breeding a new generation of Bok that isn't traumatized by the All Blacks and doesn't think of the All Blacks as unbeatable. Okay, fair enough. Check. You know, tick the box. What about if I can take my old players who beat them plenty but lost more and find a way to also intermingle that? I think that's brilliant. And I think there's things that Willie LaRue is good at, and I think there's things that he struggles with. But one thing he's never struggled with is confidence. And I do think when you talk about Moody being nervous and you think about Sasha, no matter how much he projects that cool vibe, there's got to be some butterflies. I don't think Willie LaRue has any inkling of nervousness about this match. I think he's ready, just as ready as Jasper Wiese was to take the field a week ago. I think Willie's chomping at the bit. You know, let me at them. Let me on the field. Let me show you what I can do. Classic matchup. LaRue versus Bowden Barrett. You know, let's see what happens next. Those guys have been playing against each other for ages.
Well, it might end up being Sasha versus Bowden Barrett, won't it?
That's true. Now, when Sasha comes on, given that we have Lacanio Arm as well, like who's the final replacement? You hold one back when you have a 3. But you have a little more latitude than you do if you have a 6-2 or a 7-1. You know, which one comes on first and then who shuffles? You would think so. Creel and Damien can both play wing. So it's probably going to be a lot about who's playing better. I think there might be a game time decision on substitution of Kanan or Creel or Damien. And then that slots in Lucky and then Sasha can move. Geez, I don't know. One thing is for sure, if we're having trouble doing this, All Blacks are too. So the All Blacks probably at this point in time, if Razor sat down with someone and said, tell me exactly what the permutations are, final 20, I don't know. No idea.
Let's talk about playing on the wing, but I think he's lost a bit of pace, you know, especially after that knee injury. I would see him playing 13 and then Jesse moving to wing to what I think is going to happen.
And Jesse's played enough wing defense there that you know what you could get from him. He does jam well. He usually uses the touch line pretty well. I don't think he's so much as a weapon on attack at the wing, but he's still your valuable defender. And I think that might matter most of all, because there's no way the Boks are going into this test thinking that we're gonna concede 4 tries. That cannot happen again. So if you want to keep it down to 1 or 2, you're probably thinking most of all about defense, and then you're thinking about counters. So I think the idea of having Sasha, and Willie on the field at the same time is pretty crazy and fun.
Right. And talking about the bench, because I think most of the attention should be on the bench. Like you mentioned before, there's no lock. Acknowledge lock, but Rassie said, listen, Peter Steff will probably play 18s and move to lock. And then Alrich will probably come in. So that doesn't seem to be a problem. He says, in effect, it's a 6-2 bench because of that.
Yeah, that's true. Peter Steff and Kwagga are players that change the dimensions of any bench you set up, right? There's just not that many players who can play that well at flank and lock. I've always thought Peter Steff, the toy was was better as a lock. But then when he came in and perfected the art of the big flank, I thought, oh, maybe he's better at that. So maybe we don't know. Maybe I have no idea.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something I've been wrong on. Yeah, he's definitely fine. He's fine playing lock. He played so much at lock, and then like I've said, there's only 5 or 6 scrums in a match anyway. So that's the only time in which you are supposed to be a lock. You got a line out time. Who cares? There's plenty of jumpers. And then when you're doing defense, it seems like Pieter-Steph plays the same Pieter-Steph Malmesbury missile as he does when he's at 4 or 5 or 6. Doesn't matter.
Ragnar said on Twitter, Pieter-Steph to tackler. That's what PSTT stands for. I wanted to ask you something else that I noticed against the All Blacks last week. When Eben and Pieter-Steph were playing locks, Eben didn't move to 4 and Pieter to 5. They stayed at 4 and 5. Pieter stayed at 5 and Eben stayed at 4 and Eben stayed at 5 when they were scrumming. Why do you think that is? Why didn't they swap into their more natural positions?
Yeah, I don't know. So this also gets into length and the fit of a scrum. I know that Don Human has done a lot of study about kinetics and tried to really understand where the fulcrum of power goes through. Is it on the right shoulder of the hooker or the left shoulder of the hooker? That has always changed. Just like when you're loading a small plane and you have 6 guys and you got hunting gear or something, you have to know who's who. Literally, you might change sides. So I think it's similar. I don't even lately. I've been thinking that Pieter-Steph du Toit looks a bit bigger. I mean, muscular. So there could be some things we don't know about in the weight room. I don't think he ever took it seriously because he was just a strong guy, to lift the wagon. I think maybe he's actually shaping up in Japan to be more of a lifter. Yeah. So interesting when you have substitutions and you have guys like Elrich Lowe and Kwagga Smith coming on. It really changes the configuration. Kwagga's so small. I mean, he's really a small guy to have on the side of a scrum. But if you have Kwagga next to Eben, maybe it's better than if you have, Lowe next to Eben. So yeah, literally in scrum wars now, it's not that great to be imbalanced because even if you have dominance but you come around, the ref could ping you.
Yeah, all right. And then the other thing that shame, poor Ben Jason Dixon, even had a social media apology for not having shaped up, and then he's not even on the bench in this game. I mean, we talked about Rassie's man management, with Evan Roos and Elrich Lowe. I'm going to discard you, but prove to me that you can come back. Do you think this is one of those instances?
It's probably more situational. I think they trust him. But I do think that when you're doing a closeout match like this, you probably want the most predictability you can possibly have. You want to be unpredictable to the outside, but inside the camp, be predictable. When you had a guy who had one of the best matches ever for a rookie, and then you have a bad one, your problem is you don't know if you're on some kind of up-down. You also wonder, now will he try too hard? If the mistakes, as I said, were errors of enthusiasm, and they were, then you almost don't want him to be even more enthusiastic. But also it's kind of weird to say, hey, try less hard. So I don't know, maybe they just needed some time to work through the mental side of that. But I mean, I think it's also a reward, let's be honest, for Elrich Lowe. I think Lowe's versatility, being able to play 5 or 7 or 8 is also a player in that.
Certain Cars has a wide selection of vehicles available at certaincars.co.za and at our branches at Casino and Mainland. With over 30 years of trust and excellence, Certain Cars is your #1 nationwide dealership. With over 95% customer satisfaction, our hand-picked cars will ensure that you find your dream car from one of the top brands available at Certain Cars. Certain Cars, the better way to buy and sell cars.
All right, just talk about the game itself, the crowd, for example. The Cape Crusaders called, people are saying the All Blacks are playing a home game in Cape Town, like us, where we were playing in Perth. I don't think that's true. It might be to a small degree, but not nearly the way as much as it used to be.
I mean, there'll be a sub-contingent. They'll be louder on average than the non-Cape Crusaders because they're so maniacal about it. When you go back and think about the word fan, it's fanatic. And they are fanatics. They are fanatics against something. To me, that the course of history which, shameful as it was for many people and as tough as it was, it had an aspiration, it had a moment, it had an object. What they wanted was the ability to play on the same field, make their mark, and be judged alongside. So now when you go 30 years forward and you say, 30 years into full democracy in South Africa, I'm going to be cheering for Ethan de Groot or Fletcher Newell from the South Island of New Zealand. You may be a hog hunter for all I know. You might have some, very reactionary views of his own. But I'm going to be rotating. I want him to smash the Kraaifontein boy. I want Cheston Colby to be left in a heap. I want Fletcher to be laughing at him. I want Kanan Moody to fail. I want Grant Williams to somehow be tripped up by Scott Barrett. This makes no sense, guys. At some point, when you start to get what you said you wanted, you have to have enough humility to say, as imperfect as it is, and as horrible as it was, and as fanatic as you might want to be, no one cares about you supporting a team. People from Cape Town support Liverpool in football, but it doesn't have the same loaded, holier than thou, veil on, where you're saying, I'm a better person than you because I'm doing this, when it just seems like stubbornness. The guys I know that are honest about it, I know plenty of people who support the All Blacks for this very reason. They are quite clear to me. They go, Harry, I'm just bitter. Harry, I just don't like it. I'm just stubborn. I'm an old man and I don't want to change. That's fair. I got no problem with that. But don't come in with this kind of, not enough has been done, and so therefore, guys, you have people to support on this team. Curtly Aronson need your support. Cheston Colby would dearly love your support. Come on.
Yeah. All right. You've mentioned before, right in the beginning, you think the Springboks going to win this one. You stick to that? How far is it going to be? What are you expecting, just in brief?
I think it's a statement win. These teams don't tend to have blowouts, except for there were some blowouts of us under the Alistair Coetzee regime. But so I don't think it's blowout, but I think a proper statement win, where even allowing for the inevitable referee errors, which tend to balance out, and let's all remember that, please, both ways. I think it's going to be beyond the margin of error. It will not be. I don't think it's a win where they're going to say later, but we could have won if that, this, that. I think it's going to be a proper win. Why do I say that? Mostly is because I don't think there's enough imagination in the starting team of the All Blacks. And I think Will Jordan sometimes is a guy who finishes things, but I'm not sure he starts things. And I don't think there's enough ignition. I also think Damian McKenzie can be rocked. And if I was thinking about one thing I might want to do is, if I was Sia, just test my nose against Damian McKenzie. Like, stick that right in his ribs. Let's break some bones together, and let's see what happens then. Damian has always showed some fragility when he gets touched. The problem is, if you don't touch him early and often, then he could be a menace.
Okay, Rief, thanks, man. That was a Lekker one, a very quick one. We had to move, like I said, we had to move everything forward. Like Rassie also caught us in his mind game, so there we go. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Okay, looking forward to it, man.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Welman.